Since religious traditions predate current governments, they're often the source for many present-day laws and punishments by the government. Some religions have strict systems of laws that have been adopted fully by some governments. An example of this is Sharia, or Islamic law, which is based entirely on the teachings of Islam and has been adopted by some fundamentalist religious groups, such as the Taliban in Afghanistan, as the law of the land. While no highly industrialized countries have fully adopted religious laws, their legal codes often show clear influence of religion. In the United States, many communities have blue laws, laws that restrict certain activities, such as the sale of alcohol, on Sundays. In Colorado and some other states, all car dealerships must be closed on Sundays as well. In most countries, religious beliefs are more influential as guides to personal behavior than as state-sponsored laws. For example, many faiths include guidelines on the choices people make about what clothes they wear or how they cut their hair. Most faiths include some food taboos, which are prohibitions against eating and drinking certain items. For example, many Hindus do not eat beef, and many Jews and Muslims do not eat pork. Religion is also the source of many daily, weekly, or annual practices for adherents. Many Muslims pray 5 times a day, and many Buddhists and Hindus engage in daily meditation. Most religions have weekly religious services or worship or instruction. For example, Muslims usually gather on Fridays, Jews on Friday evenings or Saturday mornings, and Christians on Sundays. Many people celebrate important religious holy days, such as Holi, a festival of light for Hindus, and Vesak, which commemorates the birth of Buddha. In addition, many days that people now commonly treat as secularized holidays actually have their roots in religious practices. Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, and Mardi Gras all originated as Christian holy days. Like all human activities, religion influences the organization and use of space. This appears in both how people think about natural features and what people build. Many specific places and natural features have religious significance. Some sites are sacred spaces where deities dwell. Followers of Shinto view certain mountains and rocks as the homes of spirits. Other sites are not sacred, but are important for what occurred at them. Mount Sinai is honored by Jews, Christians, and Muslims because they believe it was where God handed the 10 Commandments to Moses. Some entire cities, such as Jerusalem in Israel, Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and Lhasa in Tibet, have special religious meanings. Sacred physical features are important, but rare. More commonly, people express their beliefs through the cultural landscapes that they create. Like memorial spaces to the dead, like cemeteries, are traditionally located close to worship spaces. Restaurants and food markets often cater to particular religious groups by offering religiously approved food. And signs are often written in the language and sometimes the alphabet that reflects the ethnic heritage of the group. The most obvious example of the cultural landscape shaped by religion is in architecture. Each major faith provides specific examples of this. Christian churches often feature a tall steeple that's topped by a cross. Churches also demonstrate how the origin of the architectural style was often influenced by the environment, such as the climate and available building materials. The hearths of that faith are more likely to resemble the original architecture. Christian churches closer to the Mediterranean tend to have dome-shaped roofs that reflect the traditional style of architecture popular with the Romans, while churches in Northern Europe have steep, pitched roofs designed for snow to slide off in the winter, because the buildup of snow on a flatter roof can cause the roof to cave in. Cultural influences similarly shape the preferred and available materials to build such structures. One similarity among Christians is in treatment of the deceased. In most parts of the world, Christians bury the dead in cemeteries. However, cemeteries vary greatly. Most are underground, but in New Orleans, where the water table is very high, they're above ground. Hindu temples often have elaborately carved exteriors. Thousands of shrines and temples dot the landscape in India. Sacred sites, such as the Ganges River, provide pilgrims a place to bathe for the purpose of purification. Many Hindu shrines and temples are located near rivers and streams for this very purpose. Hindus practice cremation of the dead as an act of purification as well, although a shortage of wood has made cremation very expensive. The ashes of the deceased are often spread in the Ganges River. As the population of India has increased, so has the amount of ashes in the river, which has raised some concerns about pollution. The practice of Buddhism differs widely from place to place, from ethnic group to ethnic group. However, most Buddhists emphasize meditating and living in harmony with nature. These features of Buddhism are represented in stupas, which are structures built to symbolize 5 aspects of nature: earth, water, fire, air, and space, where people can meditate. Among Buddhists, the decision to cremate or bury the dead is a personal choice. Jews worship in synagogues or temples. Once concentrated in the Middle East, Jews spread throughout the world because of exile or persecution, or through voluntary migration. This scattering is known as the diaspora. A diaspora occurs when one group of people is dispersed to various locations. Temples vary in size based on the number of Jews in an area, and burial of the dead customarily occurs before sundown on the day following the death. In places where Islam is widely practiced, the mosque is the most prominent structure on the landscape and is usually located in the center of town. Mosques have domes surrounded by a few minarets, which is Arabic for beacon, from which daily prayer is called. Burial of the dead is to be done as soon as possible, and burials are in cemeteries. Shinto, whose cultural hearth is Japan, emphasizes honoring one's ancestors and the relationship between people and nature. One common landscape feature of Shinto shrines is an impressive gateway, or torii, to mark the transition from the outside world to a sacred space. The first group to establish cultural and religious customs in a space is known as the charter group. Native Americans were the original charter group in the Americas. Their influence appears in many places, such as in place names from Mount Denali in Alaska to Miami, Florida. Often, charter groups show their heritage. For example, English settlements in colonial America resembled the settlements they migrated away from in England, and names such as Plymouth and Jamestown reflect this heritage. Ethnic groups that arrive after the charter group may choose to bypass the particular location and establish their space with their own customs. In urban areas, these enclaves become ethnic neighborhoods. In rural areas, ethnic concentrations form ethnic islands. Their cultural imprints revolve around housing types and agricultural dwellings that reflect their heritage. Because ethnic islands are in rural areas and have less interaction with other groups than do groups in cities, they maintain a strong and long-lasting sense of cohesion. Today, Germanic ethnic islands of people who fled religious persecution in the past continue to exist in the United States, and people like the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Amish, and in Canada, like Mennonites in Alberta, and in scattered locations in the Balkan region of southeastern Europe. Ethnic neighborhoods in urban settings are often occupied by migrants who settle in a charter group's former space. The charter group has already shaped much of the landscape, but new arrivals create their own influence as well. Dozens of cities around the world, Melbourne, Australia, Qasr, Iran, Liverpool, England, San Francisco, all have neighborhoods known as Chinatown. Often the name lives on even if the new arrivals have moved out or assimilated, and the neighborhood primarily caters to tourists. Ethnic groups move in and out of neighborhoods and create new cultural imprints on the landscape in a process geographers call sequent occupants. In Chicago, the Pilsen neighborhood is heavily Hispanic today, but its name recalls its history as a home for German and Czech immigrants. In New York City, the neighborhood of Harlem has been home to many ethnic groups: Jews from Eastern Europe starting in the late 1800s, African Americans from the southern United States starting in the 1910s, and Puerto Ricans starting in the late 20th century. As a result of sequent occupants, Harlem's cultural landscape includes former Jewish synagogues, public spaces named for African American leaders such as Marcus Garvey Park, and street names honoring Puerto Rican leaders such as Luis Munoz Marin Boulevard.